it's a little rough for me watching this fight because I'm a fan of both Magna and Dante. It's really going to depend on exactly what Tabata's large-scale plans for Dante really are going to amount to see if he pulls through this fight. Because there's the whole idea that Dante isn't actually going to be as big of a villain as he's made out to be initially. He doesn't have to be the main villain of the whole arc to really, to kind of like have that level of weight in the arc. He can still just be a very formidable opponent, seemingly for just the Black Bulls for the most part. But there's also the idea if he ends up being like that main focus villain, because unless the bigger devils come out, the two people that, you know, hold the most position for it, you have Morris and you have Dante, because Morris has the potential just based off, you know, having a similar devil mark as Dante. You know, a lot of people have alluding to like the importance of that. The whole fact that he's, you know, getting into Lola Chica's head, getting all of this Heart Queen wisdom. He's also, you know, a genius magic scientist. So there's a lot of capability and possibility that he can present into the story following, you know, whatever he gets out of her head. So how this is going to go, I think, is really going to depend on, like, the question of whatever Tabata's got for him. Because if Tabata's just like, all right, you know, this is essentially going to be the amount of Dante, and that's, I would assume then he's going to lose from this one and not come back. But I'm hoping that's not the case, because I actually like Dante, like I said. He has a lot of potential as a villain, and I really like his whole, like, philosophy and belief of ideals that, like, human nature inherently actually is, like, all the dark, more vicious and malicious emotions, because humans are the creatures that tend to have them. So I'm hoping that he is actually able to pull through from this fight and develop in his own way. Like, he doesn't have to pull like a complete heel turn and have like his whole view of things alter. I think it just has to be in a way that it grows to progress where it was. Like, maybe he starts really seeing how those darker emotions help people grow, and he can kind of use that as a way to kind of like see how he can find enjoyment and emotion in his life. Because the thing about Dante that is very true, and I don't, like, he's a bad guy, don't get me wrong, but I don't really blame him from the standpoint of, like, him going down this pathway, because clearly from what we saw, at least from a little bit of his flashback, other aspects of life didn't do anything for him. Like, he just was in this, like, dead emotional state, and then he, you know, he came to this realization towards, like, the beliefs he holds now. So given, like, he's clearly not mentally stable, I think, you know, having this one clear pathway that actually makes him feel like he's alive and gives him, like, this sense of life, it's in a way that I can understand why he would continue down that pathway after, you know, discovering it. But during this now, we have, you know, obviously him fighting Magna, and Magna's in a good spot, I'm not gonna lie. Like, I really like the description of how Magna's new spell works, you know, this special kind of mana method trap, just because it's a really cool way that it explains how Zora was using his, you know, his mana method and his whole setup in a way that benefits not only Magna, but it can benefit a lot of other characters, because you can have other peasant people with low amounts of mana grow from this. It gives an entire new pathway to lower characters being able to find a way to stay relevant, and I think that's really cool, because, like, we are getting introduced to stuff like Mana Zone, Mana Method, True Magic, Ultimate Magic, but those really only apply to bigger people. They really only apply to the characters with all this untapped potential, large amounts of mana and skill, and either achieving that through hard work or talent, regardless of what it was. It really closed the door on a lot of the smaller characters. But the way that Magna and Zora, like, go about it, because Zora explains how the difference between the way that the Heart Kingdom uses it is they'll just whip up stuff on the spot. They're pretty much, you know, making their mana methods and their runes and whatnot to fight in specific ways at the drop of a hat, where it's more of like on your feet kind of style of using it. Whereas Zora, he says that because the ones that they make have such small amounts of mana, they're able to make them last longer, but they're also more complicated. But to do so, they also have to take prep time. And I thought that was really cool because it makes sense, obviously, with Zora's whole thing about, getting prepared and, being around traps and whatnot really builds into a logical way that he can expand it upon, again, other smaller characters. And on top of that, like, them being able to have more complicated styles of it is really cool because it keeps a lot of possibilities of what they can still do without it just being like a lesser form of whatever the Heart Kingdom's versions were. So the way it's described and the way that I personally think after Magna talks about it, they're talking about how he has to learn more about mana and himself and to really kind of like figure out how he wants to do things. And that's when he comes up with the whole idea, the soul chain he's using on Dante. And he says, like, when they're talking about, like, oh, it'll take a ridiculous amount of time to get it prepared and to just kind of get it all set up. And he says, like, it took like 6 months in order to do it. I don't think it was like 6 months per use. It was 6 months to create. I talked about it a little bit in my stream yesterday. I compared it a little bit to, it's kind of like how Minato made the Rasengan, and it took him, I think it was like, 3 years, but it took Naruto like 2 weeks to learn it. It's completely different creating something than learning how to do it when you have like all the steps and whatnot in order to actually progress towards that. Like it's the difference between if you were going to, like, imagine trying to create a computer. You're the first guy to create a computer versus a guy who, has a book on how to create computers, or the guy who created it, explains it to you and gives you a bunch of steps in order to, do it in a much more timely fashion. It makes a lot of sense the way that it's set up. So, further beyond that, I think that how long it's going to take for Magna is going to be important. Like, if it's like 6 months, like if it takes him 6 months to use it once, I think that would be kind of dumb, just because it would really limit what Magna can do. Whereas, like, if it takes him, say, a day, 2 days, and it just becomes something that he has to just prepare before going into battle. Kind of like Zora's whole reflection trap that he keeps on himself. Like, he's able to have that, but it's not like it goes off, he just puts on another one. Clearly, it's something he has to set up in advance. So, if we can get the same thing with Magna, where it's like, maybe after this fight, he has to go recover or something, he has downtime of, I know it's not going to be like days, but it'd be like, maybe if he has a couple hours, and he's like, okay, now it takes 10 hours to prepare it or something, and he has to go and set it up. Where it would be possible to do it if he's able to get away and get somewhere safe enough to prepare it, but it's not something that he could potentially just do again on the battlefield. With this whole setup, I'd be fine like a couple days later if he tried this again on somebody, but I don't want to see it like, oh, right after this 15 minutes later he goes and uses against Vonica or Xenon or something. And I don't want it to be like he uses it once and then we never see it again, because I think that would be a killer of what like was revealed in this chapter and the parts that I find interesting about what it can really do for a lot of the weaker characters, and how it really just opens a lot of pathways and doorways for them to advance and to stay relevant. Because like when we're getting to characters like Ultimate Magic, Devils and stuff, the peasants, the people with lower mana that don't have the massive mana pool that we've seen with like Royals or Luck or something, it would almost null out the possibility of them doing anything if there wasn't something that they could do in order to progress and advance. I know that was one of the big things people have been wondering about when it comes to Magna for a while. Like, there was like the idea of he was going to be using magic tools. I had the idea he was going to be using essentially magic tools that were guns, maybe like shooting his fireballs and finding out, or maybe them upgrading him in certain ways to be able to, to use them. We also just got some information on like the chain itself, because the chain itself was another question people had since the last chapter of how exactly does it work? Could you just cut it or break it? But now we know that like it's part of their souls. Essentially, their souls are connected, and if you break it, he says that you'll like go insane. Very curious as to how that would actually like go about. And there was some people, oh god, I wish I remember who had the theory, just because I can give them the credit. Like if Jack comes in and accidentally cuts it, like, would it just make Dante insane and just completely, like, make him go off? Because that would be really cool if that's, like, the progressive state of, like, what's going on. And then maybe it would be Dante just completely loses his mind, and Magna doesn't defeat him. Magna, you know, gets his props in, but it'd be like Dante goes insane, he doesn't stick around, and he goes to do something else. Like, maybe he goes after Asta, or he decides just to go outside and wreak havoc or something. And, you know, there's a lot of possibilities of what he could do. It would just be the question on what exactly, again, Tabata has planned for him. Because it could easily be an ending for Dante for the next couple chapters, which, again, I hope is not the case. Or it could be into what really progresses him. Because on top of this, we know from the fight with Yami, Dante has, like, he's not as good of a fighter, but he has like just he has a large scale of mana. He's got a large mana pool from both his own, like, seems to be a lot, and then his, you know, his whole setup with Lucifaro. And on top of that, he's got two really powerful magics that combo well together. And he does, like, because of that, he doesn't have the level of fighting capability and skill and tact that that Yami had. And this could be what really puts him into a spot to kind of get better at fighting, because right now he's on equal grounds with this guy, and it really, like, comes down to, like, fighting technique. If, like, he had his singularity, that'd be one thing, because he could just throw his singularity at Magna and call it good. But he doesn't have any of that. He mostly just has his regular gravity attacks, and I would imagine he could have other just various things, like, you know, when he uses, you know, what is it, I'm trying to remember exactly what it's called, the high pressure crafting or whatever, when he made, like, the swords, or, you know, throwing stuff at high speeds with gravity at him. Those, you know, he could still do stuff like that, I would assume, but I don't see those being that effective. Whereas, because, you know, Magna is powered up as well, so it would just come down to, like, okay, can Magna just, you know, punch it or destroy those things? Whereas, like, his singularity is just a really broken ability that I don't think he would be able just to punch. He would have to either dodge or figure out a way around it. So, this could be what forces Dante to kind of look at himself and be like, I should probably get good at fighting, get some skill, and actual battle tact, and progress his character in that way as well. So we'll see. Other than that, though, comment below. This is a short chapter, read really fast, so I didn't have a ton to say. It was mostly on, like, the possibilities of what Magna and Zora have just presented to other characters, essentially. But other than that, comment below, thumbs up the video, friend the like button, subscribe button, and check out my other videos. Further than that, I appreciate everyone who's already subscribed, and thank you all for listening. Bye.